The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Ashford Palace as Queen Regent Helena adjusted her pearl necklace for the third time. Today marked the 10th anniversary of her marriage to King Edmund, and the palace buzzed with preparations for the grand celebration. Yet beneath the surface of royal protocol and careful smiles, tension simmered like water about to boil. Helena had never been the people's choice for queen. When King Edmund's first wife, the beloved Queen Isabella, died in a tragic riding accident, the nation mourned for months. Isabella had been everything a queen should be: gracious, charitable, and genuinely loved by her subjects. She had given Edmund 2 beautiful children before her untimely death, Prince Alexander, now 16, and Princess Sophia, barely 12 when she lost her mother. Helena, then Lady Helena Blackwood, had been Isabella's closest friend and confidant. She had comforted the grieving king, helped care for the orphan children, and, gradually, quietly, won Edmund's heart. Their marriage 2 years after Isabella's death had been seen by many as too soon, too convenient. The press had been merciless, calling her everything from an opportunist to worse. But Helena had endured it all with the stoic grace expected of royalty. Now, 10 years later, she thought those days were behind her. She had proven herself as queen, had borne Edmund a son of her own, little Prince Marcus, now 8 years old. She had worked tirelessly for her chosen charities, had modernized many palace traditions, and had even begun to win over some of her harshest critics. But the past, Helena was about to learn, has a way of refusing to stay buried. The first sign of trouble came during the morning briefing with her private secretary, Mrs. Whitmore. The elderly woman, who had served the royal family for over 30 years, looked unusually flustered as she approached Helena's sitting room. "Your Majesty," Mrs. Whitmore began, her voice carrying an edge Helena had rarely heard, "there's been a development regarding today's celebration. Lord Pemberton's daughter arrived unexpectedly last night." Helena felt her stomach drop. Lady Catherine Pemberton, Isabella's younger sister, who had been traveling abroad for the past several years. Catherine had never hidden her disapproval of Helena's marriage to Edmund, had never accepted her as queen. At Isabella's funeral, Catherine had made a scene, accusing Helena of manipulating a grieving man. The family had quietly sent her on an extended tour of Europe to avoid further scandal. "I see," Helena said carefully, setting down her teacup. "And I suppose she'll be attending tonight's festivities?" "That's not all, Your Majesty." Mrs. Whitmore's hands trembled slightly as she consulted her notes. "She's requested a private audience with you before the celebration begins. She says it's regarding something she discovered among her late sister's belongings, something she believes the family should know about." The color drained from Helena's face. Isabella's belongings had been carefully sorted after her death, with personal items given to the children and official documents archived. What could Catherine possibly have found that hadn't been discovered years ago? "Schedule the meeting," Helena said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "But make sure it's brief. I have numerous obligations before tonight's celebration." As Mrs. Whitmore left to make arrangements, Helena moved to her private study window, gazing out at the palace gardens where gardeners were setting up for the evening's outdoor reception. In the distance, she could see Princess Sophia practicing her violin in the music pavilion. The girl had inherited her mother's musical talents and her ethereal beauty, but also Isabella's strong will and sense of justice. Helena had tried desperately to connect with her stepchildren over the years, but it had been an uphill battle. Prince Alexander had been polite but distant, always correct in his behavior but never warm. Princess Sophia had been even more challenging. She remembered her mother clearly and seemed to view Helena as an interloper who could never measure up to Isabella's memory. Only little Prince Marcus brought pure joy to Helena's life. Her biological son was a bright, energetic boy who bridged the gap between his half-siblings and his mother. Alexander and Sophia adored their little brother, and, through Marcus, Helena had found moments of genuine connection with them. But those moments were rare and precious, easily shattered by any reminder of the complicated family dynamics. The sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted her thoughts. King Edmund appeared in the doorway, looking distinguished in his afternoon attire, his graying temples adding dignity to his still handsome face. At 52, he remained an imposing figure, though Helena sometimes caught glimpses of the profound sadness that had never entirely left his eyes after Isabella's death. "My dear," he said, crossing to kiss her cheek, "you look troubled. Is everything prepared for tonight?" Helena hesitated. Should she tell him about Catherine's unexpected arrival and mysterious request for a meeting? Edmund had been so happy these past few weeks, genuinely excited about their anniversary celebration. He had been working with the palace staff to plan surprises for her, had commissioned a new portrait of their family, and had even written a speech about their life together that had brought tears to her eyes when he'd practiced it. "Everything is proceeding smoothly," she said finally, deciding to handle Catherine herself before involving Edmund. "I was just watching Sophia practice. She's become quite accomplished." Edmund joined her at the window, his face softening as he watched his daughter. "She has her mother's gift for music. Isabella could make the violin sing like an angel." He paused, then looked at Helena with genuine warmth. "But you've been wonderful with the children, Helena. I know it hasn't always been easy, but you've shown them patience and kindness even when they didn't reciprocate." "They're good children," Helena replied, meaning it despite the challenges. "They just needed time to heal." "As did I," Edmund said quietly, taking her hand. "I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for that, for helping me find my way back to living instead of merely existing." Helena squeezed his hand, feeling a renewed surge of love for this complicated, wounded man who had become her whole world. Whatever Catherine Pemberton wanted to discuss, Helena was determined not to let it destroy the happiness they had built together. The afternoon passed in a blur of final preparations. Helena met with the head chef about the evening's menu, approved the floral arrangements, and reviewed the guest list one final time. Nearly 200 nobles, dignitaries, and family friends would attend the celebration, including several foreign ambassadors and representatives from the Commonwealth nations. At 4 o'clock, Helena made her way to the Blue Salon for her meeting with Catherine Pemberton. The room, with its silk-covered walls and priceless artwork, had always been Isabella's favorite for private conversations. Helena wondered if Catherine had requested it specifically for that reason. Lady Catherine Pemberton had always been the more dramatic of the two sisters. Where Isabella had been serene and graceful, Catherine was passionate and impulsive. She was 35 now, still unmarried, still beautiful in a sharp, angular way that commanded attention. She stood as Helena entered, offering a curtsy that was technically correct but somehow managed to convey disrespect. "Your Majesty," Catherine said, her voice cool and formal. "Catherine," Helena replied, choosing to use her first name rather than her title, hoping to establish a more personal tone. "I understand you wanted to speak with me privately. I hope your travels have been enlightening." "They have been many things," Catherine said, settling back into her chair without waiting for Helena to sit first, another small breach of protocol that spoke volumes. "But I'm not here to discuss my travels. I'm here because of what I discovered among Isabella's private papers." Helena felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. "I wasn't aware Isabella had any private papers that weren't already archived with the royal historians." Catherine reached into her handbag and withdrew a leather-bound journal, its cover worn with age and handling. This was hidden behind a false panel in Isabella's writing desk. Mother discovered it when she was finally ready to sort through Isabella's childhood room. She gave it to me because she couldn't bear to read it herself. Helena stared at the journal, a sick feeling growing in her stomach. "What does it contain?" "Isabella's private thoughts during the last 2 years of her life," Catherine said, her eyes never leaving Helena's face. "Including her growing suspicions about her best friend's true motivations." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Helena forced herself to remain calm, though her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. "I think you should know," Catherine continued, "that Isabella was aware of your feelings for Edmund long before her death. She wrote about the way you looked at him, the way you found excuses to spend time at the palace, the way you comforted him during his periods of depression and state anxiety." "Isabella was my dearest friend," Helena said quietly. "Of course I wanted to help during difficult times." "Help," Catherine repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Is that what you call systematically undermining a marriage?" Isabella wrote that you encouraged her to spend more time on her charitable work, knowing it would take her away from Edmund. You suggested she take that writing holiday alone, the trip where she died, because you said she needed time to find herself. Helena felt the blood draining from her face. That's not how it happened. Isabella loved her charitable work. And she wanted to take that writing holiday. I merely supported her decision. According to her journal, you planted seeds of doubt about their marriage, made her question whether Edmund truly loved her or was simply going through the motions of royal duty. You made her feel like she was failing as a wife. That's absolutely not true, Helena protested, standing abruptly. Isabella was struggling with depression after Marcus's difficult birth. I was trying to help her see that she had value beyond her role as wife and mother. Marcus? Catherine's eyebrows rose. You mean Alexander and Sophia? Isabella never had a son named Marcus. Helena realized her mistake immediately. In her distress, she had confused her own son with Isabella's children. I meant after Sophia's birth. Isabella had difficulty with postpartum depression. Catherine studied her carefully. Interesting slip of the tongue. It's almost as if you've been living this lie so long you're starting to confuse your own life with my sister's. The accusation hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Helena fought to control her breathing, to maintain the composure that had carried her through countless public appearances and private crises. What exactly are you suggesting, Catherine? I'm suggesting that you orchestrated Isabella's death. The words hit Helena like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Catherine could hear it. That's a monstrous accusation, Helena whispered. Is it? Catherine leaned forward, her eyes blazing with conviction. You encouraged her to take that writing holiday alone. You recommended the specific stable and trail route. You knew she was taking medication for depression that could affect her reflexes and judgment. And you were conveniently available to comfort the grieving widower immediately after the funeral. The investigation found no evidence of foul play, Helena said desperately. Isabella's death was ruled accidental. Because no one was looking for evidence of manipulation and psychological warfare, Catherine snapped. But it's all here in her journal. Months of careful erosion of her confidence, her marriage, her sense of self-worth. You destroyed my sister long before her horse threw her. Helena closed her eyes, trying to center herself. When she opened them, Catherine was watching her with undisguised hatred. Even if Isabella was struggling with personal issues, that doesn't make me responsible for her death, Helena said finally. And it certainly doesn't change the fact that Edmund and I have built a good life together, that we have a son who deserves to grow up in a stable, loving home. A son who was conceived remarkably quickly after Isabella's death, Catherine observed coldly. One might wonder if the relationship began earlier than you've admitted. The implication was clear, and Helena felt rage building in her chest alongside the fear. How dare you suggest that Edmund would be unfaithful to Isabella, or that I would betray my closest friend in such a way? I'm not suggesting anything, Catherine said, standing and smoothing her skirt. I'm stating facts based on Isabella's own words. She suspected the affair months before her death. She just couldn't bring herself to confront it directly because she loved you both too much. Helena stood as well, drawing on every lesson in royal deportment she had ever learned. This conversation is over. If you have accusations to make, you can make them through proper legal channels. But I will not sit here and listen to you destroy the memory of your sister or the reputation of the royal family based on the confused writings of a woman who was battling severe depression. Oh, but the conversation isn't over, Catherine said with a cold smile. You see, I haven't told you what I plan to do with this journal yet. Helena felt her stomach clench. What do you want? I want the truth, Catherine said simply. I want you to admit what you did to my sister, publicly, at tonight's celebration. In front of all those guests, I want you to confess that you manipulated Isabella into depression and isolation, that you pushed her toward the activities that led to her death, and that you did it all to steal her husband and her life. And if I refuse? Catherine held up the journal. Then, I release selected excerpts to the press. Tomorrow's headlines will be very interesting reading. The Queen's dark secret: did Helena murder for the crown? I imagine the public will be fascinated to learn about their queen's true character. Helena stared at the journal, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. A public confession would destroy not only her own reputation but Edmund's happiness and Marcus's future. It would devastate Alexander and Sophia, who had already lost their mother and didn't deserve to have her memory tainted by scandal. But if she refused and Catherine released the journal, the resulting media frenzy would be even worse. I need time to consider your request, Helena said finally. You have until the toast tonight, Catherine said, tucking the journal back into her handbag. 7 o'clock sharp. I'll be watching from the crowd, waiting to hear your decision. As Catherine moved toward the door, she paused and looked back. You know, Helena, I almost feel sorry for you. You got everything you thought you wanted, but it was all built on lies and manipulation. How does it feel to know that even now, 10 years later, Edmund still talks about Isabella in his sleep? The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Helena alone in the blue salon with the devastating weight of Catherine's ultimatum. Outside, she could hear the sounds of continued preparation for the evening's celebration, servants arranging flowers, musicians tuning instruments, guests beginning to arrive for the early reception. Helena walked to the window and looked out at the gardens, now transformed into a fairy tale setting with thousands of twinkling lights and elegant decorations. In a few hours, she would be expected to stand beside her husband, radiant and gracious, as they celebrated 10 years of marriage before the cream of society. But, first, she had to decide whether to destroy her family with the truth or risk having someone else destroy them with lies. As she stood there, a soft knock came at the door. Come in, she called, expecting Mrs. Whitmore with some last-minute detail to approve. Instead, Princess Sophia entered, looking lovely in a pale blue dress that brought out her eyes that were so remarkably like her mother's that Helena sometimes found it painful to look at her directly. I'm sorry to bother you, Sophia said, her voice unusually hesitant. I know you must be busy with preparations. But I wanted to give you this before the celebration tonight. She held out a small wrapped package, and Helena accepted it with surprise. In all the years since her marriage to Edmund, Sophia had never given her a personal gift. What's the occasion? Helena asked gently. Sophia looked down at her hands, suddenly, seeming much younger than her 22 years. I know I haven't always been welcoming. I know I've made things difficult for you, and that's not fair. You've been kind to Alexander and me, even when we didn't deserve it. And you make Father happy. Mother would have wanted that for him. Helena unwrapped the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a delicate silver locket, antique and beautifully crafted. When she opened it, she found a miniature portrait of the current royal family on one side, Edmund, Helena, Alexander, Sophia, and Marcus, and, on the other side, a tiny inscription: family is not always blood, but blood is not always family. Thank you for choosing to love us. Sophia Helena felt tears spring to her eyes as she read the inscription. The timing of this gesture, coming just minutes after Catherine's devastating ultimatum, seemed like a cruel twist of fate. Sophia, she whispered, this is beautiful. Thank you. I had it made from one of the family portraits, Sophia explained, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. I wanted you to know that you're part of our family now, truly. Not because you married Father, but because you chose to be patient with us even when we were horrible to you. Helena pulled the girl into an embrace, feeling Sophia's arms wrap around her for the first time in years. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she could never make the confession Catherine was demanding. Whatever the cost to herself, she could not destroy this fragile new connection with her stepdaughter. She could not devastate Edmund on their anniversary. She could not rob Marcus of his security and happiness. I love you, Helena whispered into Sophia's hair, meaning it completely. I love all of you. I love you too, Sophia replied, and Helena could hear the surprise in her voice, as if she was just discovering this truth herself. When they separated, both women were crying and laughing simultaneously. Sophia helped Helena fasten the locket around her neck, and Helena caught sight of herself in the mirror, a queen preparing for battle, armed only with love and determination. "I should let you finish getting ready," Sophia said. "But, Helena? Tonight is going to be wonderful. You deserve to be happy." After Sophia left, Helena remained in the blue salon for several more minutes, touching the locket and trying to formulate a plan. Catherine had given her until 7 o'clock to decide, but Helena's choice was already made. She would not confess to crimes she hadn't committed, would not destroy her family to satisfy one woman's need for revenge. But she also knew that Catherine would follow through on her threat to release the journal. By tomorrow morning, Helena's reputation would be in ruins, and the resulting scandal would rock the monarchy itself. She had perhaps 12 hours to find another solution, to discover some way to neutralize Catherine's threat without sacrificing everything she held dear. As she finally left the blue salon to begin her preparations for the evening, Helena caught sight of her reflection in the mirror once more. The woman looking back at her was no longer the uncertain, grief-stricken friend who had comforted a widowed king 10 years ago. This woman was a queen, a mother, a wife who had earned her place through years of service and sacrifice. If Catherine Pemberton wanted a war, Helena was ready to give her one. The celebration of her 10th wedding anniversary was about to become the most important performance of Queen Helena's life, and she intended to win. Helena stood before her full-length mirror as her lady-in-waiting, Sarah, made final adjustments to her gown. The dress was a masterpiece of royal fashion, deep sapphire silk that brought out her eyes, with intricate beadwork that caught the light with every movement. The matching sapphire and diamond tiara had belonged to Edmund's grandmother, and the weight of it on her head served as a constant reminder of the crown's burden and responsibility. "You look absolutely radiant, Your Majesty," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. "His Majesty will be speechless." Helena managed to smile, though her mind was racing with possibilities and contingencies. She had exactly 2 hours before the formal dinner began, 2 hours to find some way to neutralize Catherine's threat without destroying her family in the process. "Sarah," she said carefully, "I need you to do something for me, and it must remain absolutely confidential." The young woman's expression grew serious. Sarah had been Helena's personal attendant for 5 years, and her discretion was absolute. "Of course, Your Majesty. What do you need?" "I want you to find Mr. Davidson and ask him to meet me in the Rose Garden in 15 minutes. Tell him it's regarding a matter of the utmost importance to the family's security." James Davidson was the royal family's head of security, a former military intelligence officer whose loyalty to the crown was unquestionable. If anyone could help Helena navigate this crisis, it would be him. "Shall I tell him what it's about?" Sarah asked. "Just that there's a potential threat to tonight's celebration that requires his immediate attention," Helena replied. "And, Sarah? If anyone asks where I am during dinner preparation, tell them I'm taking a few moments of quiet reflection before the celebration begins." As Sarah hurried away on her mission, Helena made her way through the palace's back corridors toward the Rose Garden. She had learned these less-traveled routes during her early days as queen, when she sometimes needed to escape the constant scrutiny and pressure of her new role. Tonight, they provided the perfect cover for a clandestine meeting. The Rose Garden was one of Helena's favorite spots in the palace grounds. Even in the evening light, the carefully tended beds were spectacular, filled with varieties that bloomed from spring through late autumn. The garden was also completely private, surrounded by high hedges that blocked both view and sound from the surrounding areas. Mr. Davidson was already waiting when she arrived, his alert posture and quick scan of the surroundings revealing his professional training. At 45, he was a compact man with graying hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Helena had always appreciated his ability to handle delicate situations with both efficiency and discretion. "Your Majesty," he said, offering a respectful bow. Sarah mentioned there might be a security concern regarding tonight's festivities. Helena took a deep breath, knowing that once she revealed Catherine's threat, there would be no going back. "Mr. Davidson, I need your help with a matter that could potentially damage not just tonight's celebration, but the reputation of the royal family itself." His expression grew even more focused. "I'm listening, Your Majesty." Helena quickly outlined Catherine's unexpected arrival, her possession of Isabella's journal, and the ultimatum she had delivered that afternoon. She watched Davidson's face carefully as she spoke, noting the way his jaw tightened when she mentioned the accusations against her and the threat of public exposure. "May I ask, Your Majesty, whether there's any truth to Lady Catherine's allegations?" The question was asked respectfully but directly, and Helena appreciated his straightforward approach. "The truth is complicated, Mr. Davidson. I was Isabella's closest friend, and, yes, I was aware that her marriage was struggling. I did encourage her to pursue her own interests and find ways to feel fulfilled beyond her royal duties. But I never, ever wished her harm or deliberately undermined her relationship with the king." Davidson nodded thoughtfully. "And the accusation about an affair beginning before Queen Isabella's death?" Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is completely false. My relationship with Edmund was purely platonic until after Isabella's funeral. In fact, it was nearly 6 months after her death before he even expressed romantic interest in me. But Lady Catherine has what she believes is evidence to the contrary in the form of this journal? She has the confused writings of a woman who was battling severe depression and paranoia," Helena said firmly. "Isabella was struggling with many personal demons in her final years, and, unfortunately, those struggles manifested in suspicions about people who loved her." Davidson was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the implications of the situation. "What exactly is Lady Catherine demanding in exchange for her silence?" "A public confession during tonight's anniversary toast. She wants me to admit to manipulating Isabella and causing her death in front of all our guests. Which would effectively end your reign and destroy the king's happiness," Davidson observed. "Not to mention what it would do to the children," Helena added quietly. "Alexander and Sophia have finally begun to accept me as part of their family. And Marcus, he's just a child. He doesn't deserve to have his mother's reputation destroyed by these accusations." Davidson began pacing slowly along one of the garden paths, his mind clearly working through possible solutions. "Have you considered that Lady Catherine might be willing to negotiate? Perhaps there's something else she wants, money, position, influence, that might satisfy her need for justice without requiring such a dramatic public gesture." Helena shook her head. "This isn't about material gain for her. She genuinely believes I killed her sister, and she wants me to pay for it publicly. Money won't solve this problem. Then, we need to find another way to discredit her accusations before she has a chance to make them public," Davidson said practically. "Tell me about this journal. Have you actually seen it?" "She showed it to me briefly, but I wasn't allowed to examine it closely. It appeared to be Isabella's handwriting, and it was clearly old. The leather binding was worn and aged." "That doesn't necessarily mean it's authentic," Davidson pointed out. "Handwriting can be forged, and books can be artificially aged. If Lady Catherine spent the last several years planning this confrontation, she would have had plenty of time to create convincing evidence." Helena felt a spark of hope. "Do you think that's possible?" "I think it's worth investigating. Do you know if Lady Catherine has any particular skills that might enable her to forge such a document? Artistic training, for instance, or access to historical materials?" Helena thought carefully. She studied art history at university, and she's always been interested in antiquarian books and manuscripts. She even worked at an auction house for a few years, dealing with historical documents. "Interesting," Davidson murmured. "That would certainly give her the knowledge and skills needed to create a convincing forgery. The question is whether we can prove it before she has a chance to use it against you." "How would we do that?" Davidson stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. "Your Majesty, I need to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there anything at all, in your actual relationship with Queen Isabella and King Edmund that could be used against you if someone investigated thoroughly?" Helena considered the question carefully. "There were times when Isabella confided in me about her marital struggles, and I did offer advice. I encouraged her to communicate more openly with Edmund about her feelings of inadequacy and depression. I also suggested that she might benefit from pursuing interests outside the palace, including that writing holiday. But everything I did was motivated by genuine concern for her well-being, not by any desire to destroy her marriage.
And your relationship with the king during that time?
Edmund was struggling with his own depression and anxiety about his royal duties.
As Isabella's friend, I sometimes served as an intermediary when they were having difficulty communicating.
I won't deny that I cared about him, but it was the concern of a friend watching someone she cared about suffer.
The romantic feelings developed later, after Isabella's death. Davidson nodded, apparently satisfied with her answers.
In that case, I believe we can handle Lady Catherine's threat, but we'll need to move quickly and carefully.
What do you have in mind?
First, we need to get our hands on that journal for expert examination.
If it's a forgery, we can prove it.
If it's genuine but has been altered or taken out of context, we can demonstrate that as well. Second, we need to be prepared for the possibility that Lady Catherine will follow through on her threat regardless of what evidence we present. That means having a crisis management plan ready to implement immediately.
Helena felt some of the tension in her shoulders begin to ease.
Having Davidson on her side made the situation feel less impossible.
How do we get the journal away from Catherine?
Leave that to me, Davidson said with a slight smile.
Lady Catherine is staying in the East Wing guest quarters, correct?
Yes, the Blue Suite.
Perfect.
During the cocktail reception, when all the guests are mingling in the grand ballroom, I'll have one of my team conduct a discreet search of her room. If we can locate the journal and subject it to quick analysis, we'll have our answer before the formal dinner begins.
And if it turns out to be genuine? Davidson's expression grew more serious.
Then, we'll need to consider other options. But, Your Majesty, even if the journal is real, that doesn't make Lady Catherine's interpretation correct. A depressed person's private thoughts, written during a period of emotional distress, don't constitute evidence of criminal activity. At worst, you might have been guilty of poor judgment in how you handled a friend's mental health crisis.
Helena nodded, feeling more hopeful than she had since Catherine's ultimatum. What do you need from me?
I need you to go to that celebration tonight and act as if nothing has happened. Smile, laugh, dance with your husband, and play the role of the happy queen celebrating her anniversary. The more normal you appear, the less credible Lady Catherine's accusations will seem if she does try to make them public.
And if she confronts me directly during the toast? Davidson's eyes hardened slightly.
Then, you deny everything calmly and publicly, and suggest that Lady Catherine seek professional help for her obvious emotional distress. You make it clear that her accusations are the product of grief and mental instability, not fact.
Helena nodded, understanding the strategy. Character assassination in reverse. Exactly.
Public sympathy will be on your side if you handle it correctly.
A grieving sister making wild accusations against the queen on the anniversary of a happy royal marriage?
Most people will see it as the desperate act of someone who can't accept her sister's accidental death. They spent a few more minutes discussing details and contingencies before Davidson excused himself to begin his investigation. Helena remained in the rose garden for several more minutes, breathing in the evening air and trying to center herself for the performance of her life. When she returned to the palace, the transformation was complete. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and gold leaf, the dining room was set with the finest china and silver, and guests were beginning to arrive for the cocktail reception. Helena could hear the murmur of conversation and laughter drifting from the main entertaining areas, the sounds of a successful royal gathering. In her private sitting room, she found Edmund waiting for her, resplendent in his formal evening wear. The sight of him took her breath away, as it still did after all these years. He turned as she entered, and his face lit up with genuine delight.
"Helena," he breathed, crossing to take her hands. "You look absolutely magnificent."
"I'm the luckiest man in the kingdom." She rose on her toes to kiss him, savoring the familiar comfort of his embrace.
"Happy anniversary, my love."
10 years, he mused, stroking her cheek gently.
"It feels simultaneously like yesterday and like we've been together forever."
Helena studied his face, noting the lines of happiness around his eyes, the relaxed set of his shoulders that spoke of contentment. This was a man at peace with his life and choices, and she was determined to protect that peace at any cost.
Edmund, she said softly, are you happy? Truly happy with our life together?
He looked surprised by the question.
How can you even ask that? Helena, you saved me.
After Isabella died, I was drowning in grief and responsibility. You showed me that it was possible to love again, to find joy again. You gave me Marcus, and you helped me rebuild my relationship with Alexander and Sophia.
Of course I'm happy. Even though some people still question our marriage? Even though there are those who will never accept me as your queen? Edmund's expression grew more serious. Helena, what's brought this on? Has someone said something to upset you? Helena forced a smile, realizing she was revealing too much of her anxiety. I suppose I'm just feeling reflective on our anniversary.
10 years is a significant milestone, and I want to be sure you have no regrets. My only regret, Edmund said firmly, is that it took us 2 years to find each other after Isabella's death. I wasted too much time wallowing in grief when I could have been building a life with the woman I love. The sincerity in his voice nearly brought tears to her eyes. Whatever Catherine believed about their relationship, whatever accusations she wanted to make, the truth was that Edmund loved Helena completely and genuinely. Their marriage was real, their feelings were authentic, and their family was worth fighting for.
Now, Edmund said, offering her his arm, shall we go greet our guests?
I believe there are about 200 people waiting to help us celebrate our happiness.
Helena took his arm, feeling the strength and solidarity of their partnership. Let's give them a celebration to remember.
As they made their way toward the grand ballroom, Helena caught sight of herself in one of the corridor mirrors. The woman looking back at her was every inch a queen, confident, elegant, and ready for whatever challenges the evening might bring. The sapphire tiara caught the light, the locket from Sophia rested warm against her throat, and her husband's pride in her was evident in every line of his posture. The sound of the orchestra tuning their instruments drifted from the ballroom, and Helena could smell the roses and jasmine from the elaborate floral arrangements. Everything was perfect for a royal celebration, and she was determined to keep it that way. As they paused outside the ballroom doors, Edmund squeezed her hand gently.
Ready, my queen?
Helena squeezed back, thinking of Davidson's investigation already underway, of the battle plan they had devised, and of the family she was fighting to protect.
Ready, my king.
The doors opened, and they stepped into their celebration together, united against whatever storms might come. In the crowd of glittering guests, Helena caught sight of Catherine Pemberton near the far wall, watching them with calculating eyes. The woman raised her glass in a mocking toast, and Helena responded with a gracious nod and a smile that revealed nothing of the war she was preparing to wage. The game had begun, and Queen Helena intended to win. The cocktail reception was a masterpiece of royal entertaining. Helena moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations, making small talk with foreign dignitaries, and playing the role of the contented queen to perfection. But, beneath her serene exterior, her mind was constantly tracking two things: Catherine Pemberton's location in the room, and any sign from Davidson that his investigation had yielded results. Catherine, she noted, was working the room with her own particular brand of charm. Helena watched as Isabella's sister spoke animatedly with various guests, and she couldn't help but wonder what seeds of doubt Catherine might be planting in those conversations. Was she testing the waters, seeing how receptive people might be to scandalous revelations about their queen? "Your Majesty," a familiar voice interrupted her observations. Helena turned to find Lord Chancellor Morrison approaching, his elderly face creased with what appeared to be concern. "Lord Morrison," she replied warmly, though her internal alarm bells were ringing. Morrison had served the crown for over 30 years and was one of the most politically astute men in the kingdom. If he looked troubled, it meant he had heard something significant. "Might I have a private word?" he asked quietly. Helena glanced around the room, noting that Edmund was deep in conversation with the ambassador from France and wouldn't miss her for a few minutes. "Of course." Morrison led her to a quieter alcove near one of the large windows overlooking the gardens. The sounds of the party continued around them, but they had enough privacy for a discreet conversation. I feel I should warn you, Morrison began without preamble, that Lady Catherine Pemberton has been asking some rather pointed questions about the circumstances surrounding Queen Isabella's death. Helena's heart sank, but she kept her expression carefully neutral.
What sort of questions?
She's been inquiring about the official investigation, whether all of Queen Isabella's personal effects were properly catalogued, and whether anyone has ever questioned the timing of your marriage to His Majesty. Morrison's eyes were sharp with concern. She's being subtle about it, but several people have mentioned her inquiries to me.
I see, Helena said carefully. And what do you make of her interest in these matters?
Morrison studied her face intently. Your Majesty, in my years of service to the Crown, I've learned to recognize when someone is building a case for something.
Lady Catherine appears to be laying groundwork for some kind of revelation.
Given that tonight is your anniversary celebration, the timing seems deliberately calculated for maximum impact.
Helena felt a surge of gratitude for Morrison's political instincts and his loyalty to the Crown. What would you advise, Lord Morrison?
I would advise caution, he replied. If Lady Catherine is planning some kind of public scene, we should be prepared to manage it swiftly and decisively. The reputation of the monarchy cannot be allowed to suffer due to one woman's personal grievances. Before Helena could respond, she caught sight of Davidson across the room, making his way purposefully toward the exit. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod.
The investigation was complete. Lord Morrison, Helena said quickly, would you excuse me for just a moment? There's something I need to attend to.
Of course, Your Majesty. But, please, be careful.
I have a feeling tonight may prove more eventful than any of us anticipated.
Helena made her way discreetly toward the corridor where Davidson had disappeared, her heart pounding with anticipation. She found him waiting in the same alcove where they had met earlier that afternoon. Well, she asked without preamble.
Davidson's expression was grim. The journal is genuine, Your Majesty.
The paper, the ink, the binding, all consistent with documents from that time period.
And the handwriting matches samples of Queen Isabella's personal correspondence.
Helena felt her knees go weak. So Catherine was telling the truth about having Isabella's private journal.
About having it, yes. But that doesn't mean her interpretation of its contents is accurate. Davidson pulled a small digital camera from his pocket.
I was able to photograph several pages before my team returned it to Lady Catherine's room. The entries she quoted to you are real, but they're taken completely out of context.
What do you mean?
Davidson scrolled through the images on his camera's display. Queen Isabella was indeed struggling with depression and paranoia in her final months, but the journal makes it clear that she was aware of these struggles. She writes extensively about her medication, her consultations with physicians, and her fears that her mental state was affecting her perceptions of reality. Helena leaned closer to look at the images, seeing Isabella's familiar handwriting but struggling to read the small text on the camera's screen. Here, Davidson said, pointing to one passage. She writes, I fear my illness is making me suspicious of everyone, even Helena, who has been nothing but kind to me. The doctors say paranoia is common with this condition, and I must remember that not every gesture of friendship is a manipulation. And, here, Edmund suggested I take some time away to rest and recover, but I worry that my absence will only fuel the gossip about our marriage. Helena agreed that I should go, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She knows, as I do, that I am not well. Helena felt tears spring to her eyes as she read Isabella's words. The real Isabella, not the paranoid, suspicious woman Catherine had described, but her dear friend who had been fighting a terrible battle with mental illness. There are dozens of entries like this, Davidson continued. Queen Isabella questioning her own perceptions, expressing gratitude for your friendship, and worrying that her depression was affecting her judgment about everyone around her, including you and His Majesty.
Then, why did Catherine present it so differently?
Because she's cherry-picked specific sentences and phrases while ignoring the broader context, Davidson explained. A passage that reads, sometimes I wonder if Helena wishes I would disappear so she could comfort Edmund without the complication of our friendship becomes, in Lady Catherine's interpretation, evidence that you wanted Queen Isabella dead.
But, if you read the full entry, it's clear that Isabella immediately follows that thought with, "But that's my illness talking. Helena has never shown me anything but love and support." Helena closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Relief that Isabella hadn't truly believed the terrible things Catherine had attributed to her, but heartbreak at the evidence of her friend's mental anguish. Does this mean we can discredit Catherine's accusations? Davidson's expression remained serious. It means we have the truth on our side, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can prevent a scandal. If Lady Catherine releases selected excerpts to the press without the full context, the damage could be significant. People rarely wait for the complete story before forming opinions. So what do? We have two options, Davidson said. We can confront Lady Catherine privately with this evidence and try to convince her to abandon her plan. Or we can let her make her accusations publicly and, then, counter them immediately with the full context of the journal entries. Helena considered both options carefully. If we confront her privately, she might simply deny that the context matters and proceed anyway. But if we let her make a public scene, it would be messy, but we'd be responding from a position of strength, Davidson agreed. The full journal actually supports your version of events rather than hers. But it would mean allowing your reputation to be attacked before defending it. A soft chime indicated that dinner would be served in 15 minutes. Helena realized she had to make a decision quickly. There's a third option, she said slowly. What if we approach this differently entirely? Davidson raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Catherine isn't really angry at me, Helena said, the realization crystallizing as she spoke. She's angry at herself. She's been traveling the world for 10 years, running away from her grief and guilt over Isabella's death. She probably feels like she should have done more to help her sister, should have recognized how serious Isabella's depression was. And you think she's projecting that guilt onto you? I think she needs someone to blame, and I'm a convenient target. Helena began pacing the small space, her mind working through a new strategy. But what if, instead of fighting her accusations, we acknowledged the real tragedy here? What if we used this as an opportunity to talk openly about Isabella's struggle with mental illness? Davidson looked skeptical. That's a risky approach, Your Majesty. You'd be confirming that Queen Isabella was mentally ill, which some might see as weakness in the royal family. Or it might be seen as strength, Helena countered. Mental health is increasingly recognized as a serious medical issue, not a personal failing. If we're open about Isabella's struggle, we can honor her memory while also helping other families who are dealing with similar challenges. And, Lady Catherine? Helena smiled sadly. Catherine needs to forgive herself for not saving her sister. Maybe if we can help her understand that Isabella's death wasn't anyone's fault, not mine, not Edmund's, and not hers, she can finally find peace. Davidson was quiet for a long moment, clearly considering the implications of this approach. It's unconventional, he said finally. But it might work. The key would be controlling the narrative from the beginning. How do we do that? You acknowledge the existence of the journal yourself, during tonight's toast. You talk about Isabella's private struggle with depression, your efforts to support her, and the tragedy of her death. You frame Lady Catherine's accusations as the understandable but misguided grief of a sister who loved Isabella deeply but couldn't save her. Helena nodded, feeling the pieces of a new plan falling into place. And then? Then, you announce that the royal family will be establishing a foundation for mental health awareness in Queen Isabella's memory. You turn Catherine's attack into an opportunity to do something positive, something that honors Isabella's real struggle instead of hiding it. The dinner chime sounded again, indicating 5 minutes until the formal procession into the dining room. Helena took a deep breath, feeling more centered than she had all day. Mr. Davidson, I need you to do one more thing for me. Of course, Your Majesty. I want you to approach Lady Catherine during dinner and tell her that I'd like to speak with her privately before the toasts begin. Tell her I have something important to show her regarding her sister's journal. And what will you show her? Helena smiled, touching the locket Sophia had given her. The truth about what really mattered to Isabella in her final months.
not her fears and paranoia, but her hopes for her family's future. As they parted ways, Helena felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced since Catherine's ultimatum that afternoon. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions, wasn't going to allow guilt and secrecy to poison her family's happiness. Instead, she was going to face the truth head-on and find a way to honor both Isabella's memory and her own integrity. She returned to the cocktail reception just as Edmund was beginning to gather guests for the procession into dinner. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, and Helena felt her heart flutter just as it had when they first fell in love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edmund announced, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom, "if you would be so kind as to join us in the dining room, we're ready to begin our anniversary celebration." As the guests began to move an elegant procession toward the dinner, Helena spotted Catherine near the back of the group. Isabella's sister caught her eye and raised her eyebrow in a silent question. Was Helena ready to make her confession? Helena responded with a serene smile and a slight nod. She was ready, but not for the confession Catherine expected. She was ready to tell the truth, all of it, in context, with compassion for everyone involved. The real battle was about to begin, but Helena no longer felt like she was fighting alone. She had the truth, she had her family's love, and she had a plan that might just turn Catherine's weapon into a tool for healing. As they entered the magnificent dining room, with its glittering crystal and golden candlelight, Helena caught sight of the portrait of Queen Isabella that still hung in a place of honor among the royal family paintings. Isabella looked serene and beautiful, free from the mental anguish that had plagued her final months. "I'm going to make this right," Helena whispered silently to the portrait. "For both of us." The evening's real performance was about to begin. The royal dining room had never looked more magnificent. 200 guests were seated at tables adorned with white roses, golden candlesticks, and the finest crystal the palace collection had to offer. The soft murmur of conversation and gentle clinking of silverware created an atmosphere of refined celebration, while the orchestra played softly from the minstrel's gallery above. Helena sat at the head table beside Edmund, hyper-aware of every detail around her. To her left sat Prince Alexander, looking handsome and mature in his formal attire, engaging in animated conversation with the young Duchess of Westbury. Princess Sophia sat to Edmund's right, radiant in emerald silk that complemented her dark hair, speaking French with the Belgian ambassador's daughter. 8-year-old Prince Marcus had been allowed to attend the cocktail reception but was now safely tucked in bed, spared from witnessing whatever drama might unfold. At a table near the center of the room, Catherine Pemberton sat with several members of the extended royal family and longtime family friends. Helena noticed that Catherine had chosen her position strategically, close enough to the head table to make any dramatic gesture visible to everyone, but surrounded by people who had known and loved Isabella, ensuring maximum emotional impact for any accusations she might make. The meal proceeded through its elaborate courses with clockwork precision. Helena made appropriate conversation with the guests seated near her, smiled at the right moments, and played her role as the gracious hostess celebrating a happy anniversary. But, beneath her calm exterior, she was constantly aware of the approaching moment when the formal toasts would begin. Davidson appeared periodically throughout the dinner, moving discreetly among the guests in his security role. When he passed behind Helena's chair during the fish course, he leaned down as if adjusting something on the table and whispered, "Lady Catherine has agreed to meet with you." 10 minutes before the toasts. Helena nodded almost imperceptibly, her pulse quickening. Everything depended on the next hour. As the main course was being cleared, Edmund rose from his seat and gently tapped his crystal wineglass with a silver knife. The room gradually fell quiet as all attention turned to the king. "My dear friends and family," Edmund began, his voice warm with genuine emotion, "Helena and I are deeply touched that you've joined us tonight to celebrate 10 wonderful years of marriage. Before we continue with the evening's festivities, I'd like to take a moment to speak from the heart about what these years have meant to me." Helena watched her husband with loving eyes, seeing the man who had gradually emerged from grief to find happiness again. But she was also conscious of Catherine's intense stare from across the room, and the weight of the confrontation that was rapidly approaching. "When I lost Isabella," Edmund continued, his voice growing more serious, "I thought my capacity for joy had died with her. She was a remarkable woman, a devoted mother, and a queen who served our people with grace and dignity. Her death left a void in our family and in our kingdom that seemed impossible to fill. Helena saw tears glittering in Sophia's eyes at the mention of her mother, and she reached across Edmund to squeeze the young woman's hand supportively. But life, as I've learned, has a way of offering unexpected gifts when we need them most, Edmund said, turning to smile at Helena.
Helena didn't try to replace Isabella or erase her memory. Instead, she helped us learn to carry Isabella's love forward while creating space for new love to grow. She became not just my wife, but a true mother to Alexander and Sophia, and she gave us Marcus, who has brought such light to our family. The guests murmured appreciatively, and Helena felt a warmth spread through her chest at Edmund's words. But she could also see Catherine shifting restlessly in her seat, clearly preparing for her moment to strike. I won't keep you much longer, Edmund said, raising his glass, but I want to publicly thank Helena for 10 years of devotion, patience, and love. She has made me a better man and a better king, and our family is blessed to have her. To Queen Helena, the guests chorused, rising to their feet with their glasses raised. Helena stood as well, accepting the tribute with grace while her mind raced through the final details of her plan. As the guests settled back into their seats, the royal protocol dictated that Helena would now offer her own remarks. This was the moment Catherine had been waiting for, the time when Helena was expected to make her confession or face public exposure. Thank you all for those kind words, Helena began, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she was about to do. Before I offer my own toast, there's something I need to address, something that I believe will help us all understand and appreciate the journey that brought us to this celebration tonight. She could see confusion beginning to spread across some faces, while others looked merely curious about this departure from the usual anniversary speech format. Catherine, however, sat forward with obvious anticipation, clearly believing that Helena was about to fulfill her ultimatum. Earlier today, Helena continued, I learned that my dear friend Lady Catherine Pemberton has come into possession of some private writings from Queen Isabella's final months, writings that reveal the depth of the struggle she was facing with mental illness during that difficult time. A ripple of surprise went through the room. This was not what anyone had expected to hear during an anniversary celebration. Helena saw Alexander and Sophia exchange worried glances, while Edmund's expression showed both concern and confusion. I know this may seem like an unusual topic for tonight's celebration, Helena said, her voice growing stronger with conviction, but I believe Isabella would want us to speak honestly about her battle with depression, rather than allowing her memory to be shadowed by misunderstanding or speculation. Catherine was staring at her with obvious shock. This wasn't the confession she had demanded, but it wasn't a denial either. Helena was taking control of the narrative in a way Catherine clearly hadn't anticipated. The journal that Lady Catherine discovered reveals Isabella's private thoughts during a time when she was struggling with severe depression following childbirth complications, Helena explained. It shows a brilliant, loving woman fighting against an illness that made her question her own perceptions and doubt the motivations of people who cared about her. Helena's eyes found Catherine across the room. As Isabella's closest friend, I was privy to some of her struggles, and I tried to offer what support I could. I encouraged her to pursue activities that brought her joy, to seek medical help, and to take time for herself when the pressures of royal life became overwhelming. The writing holiday where she tragically died was one such attempt to help her find peace and healing. The room was completely silent now, guests hanging on every word. Helena could see that some people were beginning to understand the subtext, that there had been accusations made, and Helena was addressing them indirectly. Isabella's journal reveals that she was aware of her illness and its effects on her thinking, Helena continued. She wrote about her fears that depression was making her paranoid, that it was causing her to misinterpret the actions of people who loved her. She specifically worried that her mental state was affecting her relationships with her family and friends. Now Helena looked directly at Catherine, her voice filled with compassion rather than accusation. Lady Catherine, I know you've been carrying tremendous guilt about not being able to save your sister from her illness. I understand why you've been searching for someone to blame for Isabella's death, and why you might have interpreted her private struggles as evidence of betrayal rather than illness. Catherine's face had gone pale, and Helena could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. The attack she had planned was crumbling as Helena reframed it with empathy and understanding.
But, the truth is that Isabella's death was a tragedy, not a crime, Helena said gently but firmly. She was struggling with a serious medical condition, and, despite the love and support of everyone around her, including you, Catherine, she made a choice to go on that writing holiday hoping it would help her heal. The accident that claimed her life was exactly that, an accident.
Helena turned her attention back to the gathered guests.
I'm sharing this with all of you tonight because I believe Isabella would want her struggle to have meaning. Mental health issues affect countless families, including royal ones, and there should be no shame in acknowledging that reality. She raised her glass, her voice growing stronger with each word. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce that the royal family will be establishing the Queen Isabella Memorial Foundation for Mental Health Awareness, dedicated to supporting research, treatment, and education about depression and related conditions. We will honor Isabella's memory not by hiding her struggles, but by helping other families who face similar challenges. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Guests rose to their feet in spontaneous applause, clearly moved by Helena's honesty and the positive direction she had given to what could have been a devastating revelation. Helena could see tears on many faces, including those of Alexander and Sophia, who looked proud of their stepmother's grace under pressure.
But Helena wasn't finished.
She had one more crucial element to her strategy. Lady Catherine, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room as the applause died down, I know this anniversary celebration has stirred up painful memories for you. I wonder if you would join me for a private conversation after tonight's festivities conclude. I have something I'd like to show you, something that I think Isabella would want you to see. Catherine nodded mutely, clearly stunned by the turn events had taken. Her carefully planned attack had been transformed into something entirely different, a moment of healing rather than destruction. Edmund took Helena's hand as she sat down, his eyes shining with admiration and love. That was beautifully done, he whispered.
Isabella would be proud of how you honored her memory.
Princess Sophia leaned across her father to speak to Helena directly. Thank you, she said simply. For telling the truth about Mother, and for making something good come from her pain. Helena squeezed Sophia's hand, feeling a profound sense of connection with her stepdaughter. Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew, she replied. She fought her illness every single day, and she never stopped loving all of you. As the evening continued with dancing and continued celebration, Helena caught glimpses of Catherine throughout the ballroom. Isabella's sister looked subdued but no longer hostile, as if Helena's words had drained the anger from her and left only grief in its place.
Near midnight, as the last guests were beginning to depart, Catherine approached Helena near the entrance to the rose garden.
You said you had something to show me, Catherine said quietly.
Helena nodded. Walk with me?
They made their way into the garden, now illuminated by soft lighting that made the roses glow like jewels in the darkness. Helena led Catherine to a secluded bench near Isabella's favorite rose bush, a variety that bloomed in shades of deep pink and cream. What I want to show you isn't a physical object, Helena began.
It's a memory. From Isabella's last visit here, about 2 months before her death.
Catherine sat rigidly, but Helena could see that she was listening intently. Isabella came to see me here in this garden on a particularly difficult day, Helena continued. She had been struggling with a severe depressive episode, and she was filled with guilt about how her illness was affecting you, Edmund, and the children. She was especially worried about you, Catherine.
About me? Helena nodded.
She knew you blamed yourself for not being able to fix her depression. She said you kept trying to find solutions, to convince her to try different treatments, to be more positive. She loved you for caring so much, but she also felt guilty that your attempts to help were causing you pain. Catherine's composure was beginning to crack. I just wanted her to get better. I kept thinking if I could just find the right words, the right approach.
Isabella knew that, Helena said gently.
And she asked me to promise her something that day. She made me swear that if anything happened to her, I would find a way to help you forgive yourself. She said you had always been the one to take care of everyone else, and she was afraid you would spend your life blaming yourself for not saving her. Tears were flowing freely down Catherine's cheeks now.
She really said that?
She said that you were the most loving person she knew, and that your inability to cure her depression didn't make you a failure as a sister.
It just made you human. Helena reached out and took Catherine's hand. Catherine, Isabella's death wasn't your fault. It wasn't Edmund's fault. It wasn't my fault.
Sometimes, despite all the love in the world, we lose people to illnesses we can't control. Catherine doubled over with the force of her sobs, years of grief and guilt pouring out of her in the darkness of the garden.
Helena simply held her, offering the comfort that Isabella would have given if she could.
"I've been so angry," Catherine whispered through her tears.
"So angry at everyone, but mostly at myself." "Isabella knew you would be," Helena replied softly. "That's why she made me promise to help you find peace.
She said you deserved to live your life fully, not spend it punishing yourself for something that was never your responsibility." They sat in the garden for nearly an hour, talking about Isabella, sharing memories, and slowly beginning to heal the wounds that had festered for 10 years.
When they finally parted, Catherine embraced Helena with genuine warmth for the first time since Isabella's funeral. "I'm sorry," Catherine said simply. "For the accusations, for the threat, for all of it. I was wrong."
"You were grieving," Helena corrected.
"And, now, hopefully, you can begin to heal."
As Helena made her way back to the palace, she felt a profound sense of peace. The crisis had passed, her family was safe, and, perhaps most importantly, she had found a way to honor Isabella's memory while helping her sister find forgiveness. In her private chambers, Edmund was waiting for her, having changed from his formal attire into a comfortable robe. He looked up as she entered, his eyes full of love and admiration.
"How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know exactly what to say tonight?"
Helena sat beside him on their bed, finally, allowing herself to relax after the long, stressful day. "Because I knew Isabella," she said simply. "And I knew that she would never want her illness to be used as a weapon against the people she loved." Edmund pulled her close, and Helena felt the warmth and security of his embrace. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Not just for what you did tonight, but for who you are every single day." Helena closed her eyes, thinking of the locket Sophia had given her, still warm against her throat.
Family, she reflected, wasn't always about blood relationships.
Sometimes it was about the people who chose to love and protect each other, despite all the complications and challenges life could throw at them. Tonight, she had protected her family not through deception or manipulation, but through truth, compassion, and courage. It was, she thought as sleep began to claim her, exactly what Isabella would have wanted. 3 months after the anniversary celebration, Ashford Palace had settled into a rhythm that felt more harmonious than it had in years. The Queen Isabella Memorial Foundation for Mental Health Awareness had been officially launched with tremendous public support, and Helena found herself busier than ever with the meaningful work of turning tragedy into hope for other families. The foundation's headquarters occupied a renovated wing of the palace that had previously been used only for storage. Helena had worked closely with architects and designers to create a space that felt welcoming and peaceful, with plenty of natural light, comfortable seating areas, and artwork that promoted healing and reflection. Isabella's portrait held a place of honor in the main reception area, but it wasn't the formal royal portrait that had hung in the dining room. Instead, Helena had chosen a more personal painting that showed Isabella in the rose garden, smiling as she read to her young children. On this particular morning, Helena was reviewing applications for the Foundation's first round of research grants when Mrs. Whitmore knocked on her office door. "Your Majesty," the elderly secretary announced, "Lady Catherine Pemberton is here to see you." Helena looked up with pleasure. Catherine's visits had become a regular occurrence since their reconciliation, and Helena had grown to treasure their developing friendship. Isabella's sister had decided to stay in the kingdom rather than return to her travels, and she had thrown herself into the Foundation's work with the same passionate energy she had once directed toward her quest for revenge. "Please send her in," Helena said, setting aside the grant applications. Catherine entered looking more vibrant and peaceful than Helena had ever seen her. She had cut her hair into a more modern style, had gained some much-needed weight, and, most importantly, the anger and grief that had shadowed her eyes for so long had been replaced by purpose and hope. "I have wonderful news," Catherine announced without preamble, settling into the chair across from Helena's desk. The University Medical Center wants to partner with us on a comprehensive study of postpartum depression in high-stress environments. They're offering to fund half the research costs themselves.
Helena smiled, genuinely delighted by the news. That's fantastic, Catherine. This could help so many women who are struggling in silence.
That's what I thought, Catherine agreed, her enthusiasm infectious.
And there's more.
The Princess of Wales called this morning. She wants to become a patron of the foundation. Apparently, she's been following our work and believes it aligns perfectly with her own mental health initiatives. The Princess of Wales was Edmund's niece, a popular and influential member of the royal family whose endorsement would bring significant attention and credibility to their cause. Helena felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected support. "We should discuss this with the board of directors," Helena said, "but I think it would be a wonderful partnership." Catherine nodded, then, her expression grew more serious.
"Helena, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Something personal."
Helena set down her pen, giving Catherine her full attention.
"What is it?"
"I've been thinking a lot about my life, about what I want to do with the years ahead of me," Catherine began.
"For so long, I've been running from my grief, traveling constantly, never putting down roots or making real connections.
But, working with the foundation, seeing the difference we're making, it's helped me realize that I want to build something meaningful."
"You are building something meaningful," Helena pointed out.
"The foundation wouldn't exist without your passion and dedication."
Catherine smiled. "Thank you for saying that. But, what I mean is something more personal. Helena, I've met someone." Helena's eyebrows rose in surprise and delight. "Catherine, that's wonderful. Tell me about him."
"His name is Dr. Michael Richardson. He's a psychiatrist specializing in grief counseling, and he's been consulting with us on some of our program development." Catherine's cheeks flushed slightly. "We've been spending a lot of time together working on the foundation's therapeutic protocols, and, well, one thing led to another."
Helena leaned forward, genuinely excited for her friend. "And how do you feel about this development?"
"Terrified," Catherine admitted with a laugh.
"It's been so long since I've allowed myself to care about someone romantically.
I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for my old anger and guilt to resurface and drive him away."
"But that hasn't happened?" Catherine shook her head. "Michael understands grief in a way most people don't.
He's lost patience to suicide, he's seen families torn apart by mental illness, and he knows that healing isn't linear. When I told him about my years of blaming you for Isabella's death, he didn't judge me. He just said that grief can make us do things that don't reflect who we really are."
Helena felt a warm glow of happiness for Catherine.
After everything she had endured, she deserved to find love and companionship.
"I'd like to meet him," Helena said. "Perhaps you could bring him to dinner sometime soon?"
"I was hoping you'd say that," Catherine replied. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd consider hosting a small dinner party next week. Nothing elaborate, just family and close friends."
"I'd like Michael to meet everyone in a relaxed setting." Helena was already mentally planning the guest list.
"Of course.
We'll make it a lovely evening."
Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Princess Sophia entered, looking radiant in a pale yellow dress that highlighted her natural beauty. At 22, she had grown into a confident young woman who balanced her royal duties with her studies in music therapy. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Sophia said, "but I wanted to let you both know that the children from the St. Mary's Hospital program have arrived for their session." The Foundation's music therapy program was one of Sophia's personal projects. Every week, children who were receiving treatment for depression and anxiety came to the palace for sessions that combined traditional therapy with musical expression. Sophia had trained extensively in music therapy techniques, and her natural empathy made her extraordinarily effective with young patients.
"How are they today?" Helena asked, always interested in the children's progress.
"Better than last week," Sophia replied with a smile.
Little Emma actually smiled during warm-ups, and James volunteered to play a piece he composed himself.
"Dr. Martinez says their progress has been remarkable since we started the program."
Helena felt a surge of pride in her stepdaughter.
Sophia had found her calling in this work, using her musical talents to help heal young minds damaged by trauma and illness.
It was exactly the kind of purposeful life Isabella would have wanted for her daughter. "Would you like to observe today's session?" Sophia asked Catherine.
"I know you're always looking for new approaches to incorporate into our programs."
Catherine stood immediately. "I'd love to. Helena, should we continue our conversation later?"
"Of course," Helena replied.
"And, Catherine? I'm so happy for you. About Michael, about the work you're doing, about everything. Isabella would be proud of the woman you've become."
After they left, Helena remained in her office for a few more minutes, reflecting on the extraordinary changes that had taken place since that 10th anniversary celebration. Catherine's transformation from bitter enemy to dear friend and colleague was perhaps the most dramatic, but it wasn't the only positive development in the royal family's life. Prince Alexander had graduated from university with honors and was now working with the Foreign Office, preparing for a diplomatic career that would allow him to serve his country while exploring his passion for international relations. He had also become much more open with Helena, often seeking her advice on matters both personal and professional. 8-year-old Marcus continued to thrive, bright and curious and beloved by everyone who met him. His relationship with his half-siblings had grown even stronger, and Helena often found the three children playing together, Marcus looking up to Alexander and Sophia with obvious adoration while they doted on their little brother. Most importantly, Helena's relationship with Edmund had deepened and strengthened through the crisis they had weathered together. The king had been profoundly moved by Helena's courage in addressing the mental health issues surrounding Isabella's death, and he had thrown his full support behind the foundation's work. They had also begun attending couples counseling together, not because their marriage was in trouble, but because they wanted to ensure they could communicate openly about difficult topics without letting secrets and misunderstandings build up between them. A gentle tap at the door interrupted her thoughts. Edmund entered, looking distinguished in his afternoon attire, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Hard at work, I see," he said, crossing to kiss her cheek. "How are the grant applications progressing?" "Very well," Helena replied, leaning into his familiar warmth. "We have funding requests from 12 different research institutions, and Catherine just informed me that the University Medical Center wants to partner with us on a major study." "Excellent news," Edmund said, settling into the chair Catherine had vacated. "I've been meaning to tell you, I had a call from the Prime Minister this morning. He's been following the Foundation's work, and he's considering introducing legislation that would require mental health education in all public schools." Helena felt a thrill of excitement. If they could reach children early, teaching them about mental health the same way they learned about physical health, it might prevent countless tragedies in the future. "That would be incredible," she said. "Did he mention a timeline?" "He wants to introduce a preliminary bill next session, but he'd like the Foundation to provide expert testimony about what such a program should include." Edmund smiled. "It seems your anniversary speech has had far-reaching effects." Helena thought back to that terrifying evening when she had been forced to choose between protecting her family through silence or protecting them through truth. She had chosen truth, and the consequences had been better than she could ever have imagined. "Edmund," she said softly, "do you ever regret that I revealed Isabella's mental health struggles? I know you valued privacy, and some people might see it as a betrayal of her memory." Edmund took her hands in his expression serious but loving. "Helena, what you did that night was one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed. You took something that could have destroyed our family and transformed it into a force for healing. Isabella would be amazed at the good that has come from her pain." Helena felt tears spring to her eyes. "I just want to honor her memory properly." "You are," Edmund assured her. "Every day, through the Foundation, through your relationship with her children, through the love you've shown this family. Isabella chose you as her closest friend because she saw the goodness in your heart. She would be proud of everything you've accomplished." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, hands intertwined, listening to the distant sound of children's laughter drifting from the music therapy session. It was a sound that would have been impossible in the palace just a few months ago, but now it had become as natural and welcome as birdsong in the gardens. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," Edmund said eventually.
About our future plans. Helena looked at him curiously. What kind of plans?
I've been thinking about stepping back from some of my royal duties in a few years, Edmund said carefully. Not abdication, but perhaps allowing Alexander to take on more responsibilities while I focus more on charitable work and family time.
Helena considered this unexpected development. What's brought this on?
Watching you with the foundation has reminded me that there are many ways to serve our people, Edmund explained. I've been king for 25 years, and, while I'm not ready to retire completely, I'd like to have more freedom to choose how I spend my time. I'd like to travel with you, to work alongside you on causes we both care about.
Helena felt a flutter of excitement at the possibilities he was describing. And, you think Alexander would be ready for increased responsibilities?
I think he's more ready than I was at his age, Edmund said with a smile. He's intelligent, dedicated, and he has a natural instinct for diplomacy. With proper support and gradual transition, I believe he could handle expanded duties within the next 5 years.
Helena squeezed his hands. What does this mean for us? For our work with the foundation?
It means we could expand our efforts significantly, Edmund replied. We could establish international partnerships, travel to other countries to study their approaches to mental health care, perhaps even work with the United Nations on global mental health initiatives.
The vision he was painting was compelling and exciting.
Helena had discovered a passion for advocacy work that she had never known she possessed, and the idea of having more time and resources to dedicate to these efforts was appealing.
We should discuss this with Alexander, she said.
And with Sophia and Marcus.
Any major changes in our roles would affect the entire family.
Agreed, Edmund said. But I wanted to share my thoughts with you first.
You've helped me remember that there's life beyond royal protocol and state obligations.
I want to explore that life with you. As if summoned by their conversation about family, Marcus burst into the office with the energy only an 8-year-old could muster. His formal school clothes were slightly rumpled, his hair was mussed, and his cheeks were flushed with excitement.
Mama!
Papa, he exclaimed, using the informal terms he had adopted for his parents.
You have to come see what Sophia is doing with the children.
They're making music that sounds like different emotions, and Emma played a song that made everyone cry happy tears. Helena and Edmund exchanged amused glances at their son's enthusiasm. Marcus had grown up surrounded by the foundation's work, and he had developed a natural empathy and understanding of mental health issues that was remarkable for his age.
We'll come see in just a moment, Helena promised, ruffling his hair affectionately. Are you enjoying having other children in the palace?
Yes. And James taught me how to play a song on the piano that sounds like being scared, and then one that sounds like being brave. Marcus demonstrated the emotional progression with exaggerated facial expressions that made both his parents laugh. That sounds very impressive, Edmund said seriously. Perhaps you'll have to perform it for us at dinner tonight. Marcus beamed at the attention, then scampered off to rejoin the music therapy session, leaving Helena and Edmund alone again. He's going to grow up with such a different understanding of emotional health than most children, Helena observed. Sometimes I think this whole experience has been as beneficial for our family as it has been for the people we're trying to help.
Edmund nodded. Secrets and silence nearly destroyed us.
Honesty and openness have made us stronger. As they prepared to join the music therapy session, Helena caught sight of herself in the mirror above her desk. The woman looking back at her was confident, purposeful, and at peace with her choices. She wore the same locket Sophia had given her on the night of the anniversary celebration, but now it represented something different. Then, it had been a symbol of acceptance and tentative belonging. Now, it represented the deep, unbreakable bonds of a family that had chosen to face their challenges together.
Ready? Edmund asked, offering her his arm. Helena took his arm, feeling the solid strength of their partnership.
Ready. They walked together toward the sound of children's laughter and healing music, toward the future they were building together, one honest conversation and one act of courage at a time. The crisis that had once threatened to destroy their family had instead become the foundation for something beautiful and meaningful, a legacy that would help other families for generations to come. In the distance, Helena could see Catherine and Sophia working together with the young patients, their faces bright with the joy of meaningful work. The rose garden beyond the windows bloomed with Isabella's favorite flowers, a reminder that even in loss, new growth was always possible. Queen Helena had learned many things in her years on the throne, but perhaps the most important was this: the truth might be difficult to face, but it was always, ultimately, the path to freedom. And freedom, she had discovered, was the most precious gift a family could give itself.